about the closeness of my father's relationship with Matthew Cowley, the prophet that the Polynesian called in New Zealand, because he served a mission in New Zealand and became an idol to the Polynesian people. And in 1939, when my father was visiting New Zealand for the government of Samoa, he got to meet Matthew Cowley, and there started a friendship. So in 1947, he came to Samoa to visit, because he had this area in the Pacific, Southeast Asia, as an apostle. And these are the books he wrote. Matthew Cowley Speaks and Matthew Cowley, Man of Faith. Now he has a testimony there of his missions to the South Pacific, in New Zealand especially, and his tour of, as an apostle around the Pacific. So in 1947 he came to our home. We had our home here and visited with us, and then held a special fireside at the chapel in our small little house that we were holding meetings in. And there gave the blessings to Nauvoo, the headquarters of the Fitisemanu, and he called it Nauvoo because he felt that was the best and most beautiful part of his land, and he gifted that to the church. And he wanted to call it Nauvoo, but he preferred to spell it Samoa. So if you people from Utah are familiar, for the church in general, familiar with Nauvoo, spelled properly, and here in Samoa you will hear that. And as you know, since then we have 2 wards now and the stake center, and there's a Nauvoo stake now, one of the strongest stakes in Samoa. In fact, in the temple right now, the temple performance, and they're visiting for a week, Nauvoo tops the whole 20 stakes. Now, I'm not saying that because I'm from Nauvoo, but I'm saying that because of the gospel that growth around this man who started the Nauvoo complex. Now, here's another book, Mighty Missionaries of the Pacific. The author was David Cummings, who was also a very good friend of ours, but he had a tremendous amount of interest and writings about Samoa. Both referred to Fitisemanu and their relationship. And there's, I think it's in that book that it has the genealogies of the Pacific as presented by Fitisemanu, because he was also the first Samoan genealogist in Samoa in a meaningful way, because Samoa are not allowed by their culture to share their genealogy, because that's a personal thing to them, and they don't want people to know, because a lot of times they would fabricate it or change it or add their names into that line of authority, which is sacred to them. However, Fitisemanu, being of royal blood, had the benefit of discussing things with his family and shared the genealogies that he collected by sending them to Salt Lake City to have the work done for the dead. Now, he was the first one that traced his lineage back to Adam through the scriptures, and then presented the Samoan genealogy that he had the outline, the frame of it. So now the Samoans, when they bring their names, ever since then, is just to connect to their own particular line of the family. And it was well known, the early LDS converts, that they would refer to the Fitisemanu studies and the Fitisemanus, and they would come from all over Samoa to discuss their lineages with our father. And that's the reason why I got this books out. I have others, but they're not here. They're either in the United States or in New Zealand. Okay, now, to connect him to me, this is his father.
The father of who?
Of my father. This is my father's father. Now, this was Malitoa Falateitaua. He was a taimua, or one of the leaders of the government, from 1900 to 1910. He passed away in 1910. Now, I would like to now these are Fitisemanu and our mother with his police uniform. All right. Then these are separate portraits. This is Fitisemanu with his lava. And this is our mother, Alisa Crichton.
Oh, are you familiar with the Crichtons?
Yeah. Her dad was Crichton, but her mom is from Waisala and Satoa. She's Malolo. And but you might like to see this Scottish girl. This is our mother when she was about 21, 18 to 21. There's a couple of guys I wanted to show you. These two guys look alike. They're both fat. This is my brother Polisi, who was a mission president in Samoa from 1987 to 1990. At the time we took this picture, he was a mission president. I was a stake president. Our brother older than us was a patriarch. And our other brother that's also older than us, Kupi, was the director of public affairs for the church in Samoa at the time. And lastly, this is not so long ago, this is a picture of the temple presidency of which I am presently serving as a first counselor to President Pear. I thought I'd share that with you. Because the church had money to build the school, but not enough to pay for the labor. And so President of the mission asked Fitisemanu to see if we can get volunteers from throughout the church. And so he called. First thing he did was to take us, 9 of us children, with his wife, to Pesenga, build a hut for us to stay there, and he took leave of whole year leave from the police, from the government, so that he can lead and provide the guidance for the labor missionaries that will be called. And that gave birth to that program, because then they began to build the chapels. First thing they did was to build that school in Pesenga now. So in 1952, Ella Grant Richard came here to dedicate that school. But the effort of labor was donated. First by the Fitisemanu family, the Paunga families came from Lauri'i, the Bawifi family from Lotuanu'u, the Brown family, Leo Brown from Malay, the To'o from Fasito'tai. That was To'olini's father, who was a teacher of my father. And many other families of the church offering their help to build and work for nothing. And so they were called as missionaries. But these missionaries needed to be fed. So Dad reached out to his families, got people that has trucks, send them out to his families all over Samoa and bring the food in on a daily basis. And then it started the whole feeling of wanting to be part, and so people started donating and sending their sons, go work for the Lord first. For 2 years on a mission and learn the trade of carpentry and building. It's amazing though, because it was so successful that the church then sent the best ones to build a chapel in Rarotonga. After that, they sent another team to Suva to build the first chapel in Suva. After that, they were sent to New Zealand to help complete the temple. That same group of young men were also sent to the church college to finish up the Church College of Hawaii, the beginning of BYU Hawaii, and the Culture Center. These were labor missionaries, so let me tell you, they felt how to be hungry and how to be poor to start. People were donating clothing and all that. But they learned the trade. So later on, when all the buildings are done, they moved to New Zealand, Australia, United States. And you know what? These guys who had no education or very little, some of them didn't even know how to write. There's a funny story about a letter that one of these missionaries sent to his supervisor who was from the United States. And he spoke in English. And he said, give me watch in the name of Jesus Christ, Amen. And we laugh about it, but that's the language they use. But what the amazing thing is that these guys, when the bosses in the construction industry that they're working for saw how beautifully trained they were, skillful in laying bricks, in laying tiles, in building, and hardly know any English at all, but they would learn the trade. And those are the guys that earn the highest wages. Those who went to school didn't fare so well, because when they go overseas, they have to compete with the kids who had better schooling. But the guys who work for the Lord for nothing were blessed. Until this day, we still have them coming back to the mission second time. We have a couple right now. You met the Salimas. That's an example. He's a beautiful builder, but he started with nothing. That idea came when Fitisemanu put that effort together, the mission president. It is mentioned here. LBC, no sooner had Elder Singer selected the site than Elder Fitisemanu recruited a force of church members eager to clear the ground and prepare for groundbreaking. The name of the mission president, Golden Hale, was the one that was here in 1948 and was responsible for most of that activity. And the next president after that. Credit goes to them because they also were the one that provided the initial leadership. But the Samoans who responded had to be organized, and that was Fitisemanu. And I think it was a good idea to call him in because he had an electrifying personality. And beside his genealogy, here in Samoa, if you have connected by blood to more people, you have more influence. So all he had to do when he needed food was send the missionaries with the truck to a village, even though they're not members, with a letter from him, please give us food to feed our missionaries. And the people turn out and fill the truck, and then send a matai, a chief, to tell Fitisemanu, include us in your list. We're not members of your church, but your church is building wonderful things, school for our children. And so when the school opened, many of those kids came from those villages that participated in this. Now, that's the perspective local from here. Many missionaries have written journal and touched on that, and we're so glad that they did. Because Samoans are not in the habit of writing, including me. I don't like writing. But this is the part of history that needs to be told, the perspective of how we see it as Samoans. And I'm grateful for this opportunity that I might express some of those things, so we can go on from here. There are some specific topics that I think I need to to touch on, to address, to complete this effort. But these are the issues that I would like to touch on, to give it around of the information success, this temple spirit and how it started, you know, and where it is right now. And also the educational process of the church and its effect on proselyting. That's what I need to do, proselyting, missionaries. Sort of giving it a bird's eye view of the total progress from one area to another. And the growth of the church since that I'm aware of, and what I saw in the early age as perhaps an 8, 9-year-old. Saw it in the chapel and saw it as we were traveling around doing mission conference in Sauniatu. It was much, much later that the conferences were held in Desenga. That was because around here the church was not very prominent. It was around the church educational system, like Mapusanga in American Samoa and Payola in Hawaii and Sauniatu here. These were more or less the centers where you know there's a lot of church people. And when you attend the conferences, there it would be there that you would witness how strong the church is. And at the time when we were very young, we thought we were looking at a really big church, you know, with all these people coming from all over, not knowing that at that time that was about the only Mormons around. That's quite different now with 2008. You know, there's not a park here that's big enough to hold a big gathering of the church right now. In fact, we put in several thousands in the celebrations for the temple, you know, and that was the biggest crowd that park ever held. But that was only a percentage of the people. We had to hold the celebrations for American Samoa and American Samoa because we can't ship them all here. So the church has come from obscurity in the last 40 years. When I first came to Samoa, serve a mission was 1960. And I started my mission in Samata. Now, if anybody knows Samata and the village called Tanga, and there's quite a distance. And if you ride the car, it's a long distance. But we had to walk from Samata through the village, through the bush, to go to Tanga to hold Sunday schools every weekend by foot. And having just arrived on a mission, my companion from Declo, Idaho, who is a potato farmer, and Bishop was his name, Clyde Bishop, he was my boss. He was my senior companion when he woke me up very early on Saturday that we have to go hold Sunday school. We got to be there before tomorrow. And I said, well, is it that far? He said, yeah, it's pretty far. So we walked, but we had the boys from the village to help us, to guide us, and took us there. Took us all day. We arrived at night by walking. That was because they slowed down for me, because I just arrived from New Zealand. Now walking and with the shoes that I brought, I was not prepared to come in with the good, proper shoes that will take the walk. I came in with my New Zealand hard leather shoes, and my feet were completely with blisters. So by the time we arrived, I couldn't put any shoes on because of my companion was telling me, don't worry, that's only the first day. You'll get over it. Because on Monday morning we had to walk back. And we did, and we had a nurse help us with the bandages to put around. But those are the things that were natural to the missionaries, who no big deal. You know, I thought I was going to die, having just come from New Zealand. But now, we did the same thing to other villages, like Sangone, like Whaiaai, in Savai, our area. Was from Samata all the way to Tonga. But there was no road to Tonga. The old roads ended in Salailua. So, Awala Sopola did the rest of the trip to Tonga. Before I left that area, we finally had the government completed the road, and when I came back a year later as a supervisor with a car, it was wonderful driving on taking the missionaries back and forth. So now at this time, I'm one perhaps of the luckiest missionaries who have come back and still work with these same people. And it's amazing when I drive through, I can never drive through without spending a lot of time looking at Tonga Chapel, because now we have a ward there. And yet my mind goes back many years back, over 40 years now, and the way it was when we were just beginning that and suffering with the ill treatments by the chiefs of the villages. I did not suffer as much as my companions and my other friends as missionaries. That's because as soon as they hear the name Fitisemanu, I was well protected on that part. So now Tonga has a chapel. Only place that doesn't have a chapel is Salailua. But we have church members there. Now Sangone is now called a state. But I remember the two people there that accepted the gospel, a couple, Leilua and Sieni. He's one of the high chiefs of the village. But he was practically crucified by his village and his family for turning to be a member. Now today in Natville, when we started, we did our Sunday school in the morning with just the two of them and their two little kids at that time. Now we have a chapel there in Sangone. It's a ward. And then the whole stake in that area is called Sangone Stake. Now we move back, coming back. It's Whaiaai. There was Fipuleai Viliamu and his wife, who was a convert. When we start our Sunday school in the morning, they were the only two members. But now That's where we have the stake center, the air-conditioned stake center in Fire. And I recognize the families that I proselyted and baptized some of them. Now they're old men like me and still remember the time when I was proselyting there with my companions. Now, Samata has 2 wards. Whangawhau has a ward. I was later transferred to Asau. At Asau, we didn't even have a place to hold our meetings. Our meetings were held in the family homes. But because my mother is from Asau in that area, Waisala, I have a lot of relatives there whom I asked if they can provide us with a little hut so we can start our meeting. We built the first hut right close to the pool at the back where the elementary school was. And we started with that humble beginning. Now we have a chapel there. And the person that I got activated in the church later became the stake president. And to me, I am so grateful that I've had the chance to come back and live in Samoa, where I now, all over Samoa in the villages where I proselyted, people that I baptized would walk up to me and bring their children and express their appreciation. Now, of course, I'm the one who has the appreciation to see them are members of the church. Now, that's not unique to me. That's how all the missionaries at that time. And I like to refer specifically at the time when President Sampson was here. That was during the time I arrived when he was a mission president, President Sampson. During that time of President Sampson, the government was successful in passing a law limiting the number of foreign missionaries in Samoa, 200 per missionary. It was actually designed to limit the number of LDS missionaries coming to Samoa. But most of the people that were here were farmers. They were not missionaries. They were farmers. They were brought in to work with the farms in the schools in Sauniatu and Mapsanga and Wayola. But in passing that law, many of those people were sent back. And it almost crippled the work of doing the work of the church because of so many people that were sent back. I remember in 1958, during the time of the dedication of the temple in Samoa, President Sampson and my father had that conversation regarding with my father suggesting that perhaps if we sent Samoans who are already citizens of Samoa, the sons of Samoa, then we wouldn't have to worry about that. The miracle was that this was proposed by President Sampson. The prophet approved it, First Presidency, and we were the first group there that were called to come on a mission. President Teo, his brother Ima, and his cousin Whitney, and a missionary from who was a professional football player for Stanford, Al Harrington, and many others came. And I was the first one from New Zealand. I got here about 5 months later. They were the first one here in Samoa. And as we spread out to the villages to proselyte, instead of looking at missionaries from the States, the people now of Samoa are looking at Samoans. Now, they're thinking now, But at this time, we had more now than what we had before of missionaries. But these are not foreign missionaries because we are Samoans. And a great thing happened during that time. A great number of people were converted because we started proselyting. We find a family that's our family, we proselyte with them, and we baptize them. And we were doing it by the thousands. All of a sudden, the numbers, instead of less than 100, it's now in the thousands in a month. I don't know the exact numbers, but some of the numbers may have reached 1,500 a month. At that time, this was back in 1960. And each year increased. They were already increased in 1959, and then 1960, and in 1961. I finished my mission in 1962. The first stake conference was held. The first stake Apia Samoa was organized. I became a stake president for that stake years later. That was the first stake in Samoa. Now, in 2008, we have strong 20 stakes. There are 5 stakes in Hawaii. There are 4 in American Samoa. I think American Samoa ought to have 6 or 7 right now if they'll divide. They're very, very strong. Their attendance are very, very impressive. And 11 states here in Upolu. And this is perhaps the only nation that is all covered by states. And we have a mission on top of that. So now, the growth of the church has been steady, and it's a sure growth. I've always been impressed with the vision that our leaders talked about growth. Slow growth is real growth. The fast growth that will go up and then we lose it in another year or so and come down, we look at the slow growth as real growth. Now, Samoa at the moment will hold their census about every 3 or 4 years. Each of the last 4 censuses that I know of, and I can recall when I was a lecturer at the National University, we often had the group of the government departments come in and discuss the growth of the population of Samoa and where they're divided in various sections, including the increase in or decrease of the religious churches. Wherein every census we had, the LMS church or the congregational church, the largest church, would drop 4% of the total membership. It's not growing, but it's diminishing by 4%. The same as the Methodist church. The Catholic seems to hold their need of growth, but it's a natural. Whereas the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, consistently, where they lose 4%, the church gain 4% in all these censuses. And 4% is small. The now small population is big. Now we are around the 3rd largest, or perhaps we're in the same position, very close. And I think because of the rate of our baptism, we're probably ahead of the Catholics and the Methodists now, the second only to the dominant religion here is congregational. And that is a testimony of the missionary work, led by the missionaries from the United States, and working as a team with the leaders here in Samoa. So with the missionary work, I remember during my mission, we didn't see our mission president for 3 months. And that's because it was very difficult to travel by boat and to find room because the boats were only carrying coconut products between the islands, and you have to find room to sit on those bags. There were no quarters for passengers. And the travel in Hawaii with the worst roads I've ever seen was very difficult. So most of the time, the church was left to us to run in the areas that are most distance from up here. But the missionary effort was intensified by the determination of the missionaries of the time and their ability to proselyte without fear. When the Samoan missionaries, prior to that era, no Samoan was allowed, no Samoan was in the proselyting area. There was only missionaries from the States. And when the Samoans were called, it was a welcome call because the parents and the families accepted that responsibility, and they're still coming. It's a great idea right now, and I have mentioned it to several mission presidents, that it will be a very healthy environment in serving them. If don't include the Samoans only in the Samoan mission, but mix them up, send them somewhere in the world, and bring the missionaries from the United States or other parts, especially from the United States, because I have a personal testimony of our people from the United States. They're used to us. They're used to our silliness and the things that we do. They understand, and we work with them. Later on, the headquarters of the church have been moved to work from New Zealand and Australia. We are trying to get used to that idea. But fortunately, we're having some great leaders coming out from New Zealand and Australia. And New Zealand, we've had a problem from time to time because New Zealand occupied Samoa militarily. And we don't have good memories of what happened to our families and those who suffered under the rules of the New Zealand administration. But when we have the brethren from the church, well, they definitely have proven themselves that it's unrelated. It's just what is in our mind because of the history of Samoa, militarily and politically. Now, at 2008, we're working as one with Australian, New Zealand leaders. In fact, most of our dynamic leaders are from there, as they are coming from the United States, wherever it is. So now it's not a church of New Zealand or the United States, it's the Lord's church, and we're getting used to the idea of melting in with other brothers and sisters. Samoans are very particular about that, and it took a lot of time for Samoans to be comfortable in because of the political environment they had to come through with the Germans' occupation, with the New Zealand mandate of a military force that was here, and we saw the beatings, the killings of our people. It was not easy. With the Australian political strong approach, we're not comfortable politically. But it took some time, but now at this time, things are working out. The Lord has a way of doing this. You know, we never thought we'd ever get into China. We never thought we'd ever get into some of the places where we're not there now. But when the time came, the Lord has already paved the way and opened it up. And it's the same thing here in Samoa. What concerns us old guys now, because of what we saw, will not be in the memories of our children. And definitely not now at this time. in relations to the foreign people that come to Samoa. I mention that only so you can see the differences in times as the church grow, as the power and the authority of the priest grow. It mends this way in its own natural way. Our concerns is of no concern at all. It's not a concern. There were incidents that reminds us of the days of the Germans with their guns. So there were incidents that reminds us of the New Zealand and their guns. But now that's not legitimate anymore because the people are coming out and the Lord has prepared them. The Lord has prepared us. Except for our memory now of those of us that are old enough to remember some of these activities, the Lord has appeased the growth of the church and it will continue. We estimate, and the government is aware of that within the next 15 to 20 years, if the Mormons continue to grow at this growth rate of growth, it would probably be the most dominant in numbers in Samoa. And one church official told me that, but if it were so, it would be the best thing that ever happened to Samoa. Because ever since your church arrived here in Samoa, everything they do sets a standard over and above what is happening in Samoa. And now every churches, every industry is following. You know, when you build a chapel, we used to make fun of it. And when you build walls around your chapels, we used to say, well, the Mormons are building walls to protect and keep their sheep in there so they don't run away or go back to their churches. But look around Samoa now and you see how many churches now have walls and have beautiful fences. And the chapels, the quality of the chapels and the appearances are improving a lot. Why? Because the Mormon church are the teachers, the examples. And that's how it should be with the gospel. This is the outward look of what the gospel is in our hearts. That's what we see physically. But spiritually, it's a result of the spiritual growth. So that may be so. We don't know what is in the future. We may face more challenges. But it's getting easier and easier to be a Mormon right now. In fact, many of my relatives would literally tell their children, go join the Mormons. You get better education, better chances of a better life. You look around the Mormons, they have better life. Their economical status is higher. You obviously see them as better educated. And yet, they have schools in their churches. And they're doing the same thing the parents used to do in our time when we were ready to baptize their families. And they'll say, the parents will pull back and say, well, we can't. But our children will. We want them to belong in that church. That's the church we would prefer to belong on. But because our chief won't allow us. So the church will grow in spite of all that. And will continue to grow. That in terms of missionary, it's been a wonderful experience to have come to Samoa, to grow up as a young man, went to New Zealand for education, sent back to Samoa to serve a mission, went back for more education and more experience. Then we made a decision when we were married. I asked my wife, after my mission, I left my heart in Samoa. We will go back to Samoa to help out. Because when I left on my mission, I knew then my mission was to come back to Samoa. Now, perhaps we would do much better in the States. We love it. If we weren't living in Samoa right now, we would be in the middle of Utah, somewhere in Sandy, where we bought our first home as parents. So that's home to us when we leave here. Well, we came back to Samoa in 1982. I resigned from a good company and good employment, came to Samoa not knowing exactly what we need to do. Well, we've been here since. During that time, we put everything we have and we've had in helping building the kingdom. Made ourselves available to the church leaders and the authorities at any time they needed, and their times. We had one area president that knew exactly what I was doing during the day. He would call around about 10 o'clock, and then I would answer the phone. President Helverson was good in that. And I answered the phone, and he says, "What hole is that?" "Number 3, right?" "Yeah." He knew I would be in the golf course. "Okay, I'm arriving such a time on the weekend. Would you free your time to accompany me?" And then we'll go, and I would be some help. When they first sent Elder Hafen to Samoa, we got a note from the church authorities that to clear my weekends for the next month and a half, I would be accompanying Elder Hafen to various state conferences reorganization. That's the time within 2 weeks we reorganized about 4 states at that same time. And I had the privilege to accompany Elder Hafen. And I've been doing that ever since. So missionary work will continue to grow, and the growth of the church is greatly noticeable by other religions. And even the educational system, they refer to these figures and the growth of the church in Samoa and its influence, economical influence. Now, I'd like to talk about the spirit of the temple spirit of Samoa. I mentioned before that in the early days when I first heard the upu, the word malu malu sa, temple, sacred temple, I was very young. You hear this in primary. And then on occasion, there's a family getting ready to go to Hawaii on a trade, these commercial ships that travels back and forth from here to Hawaii. And then later on, there was an increased number of them traveling to Hawaii from through the American Samoa. Now, that was a long time before 1958. The temple was dedicated in New Zealand, and that became the pinnacle of all the Samoans' effort, trying to earn passage to go to the temple. And that was the most wonderful thing of the excursions. My father was a chairman with President Sampson and his counselors traveling with its first excursion. President Roger traveled. President Sampson waited for the dedication when he came down to New Zealand in that temple. And then every year we would have at least 2 excursions from Samoa, from Tonga, from various areas of the Pacific coming to the temple, with no idea whatsoever at that time that the temple would ever be built in Samoa. First, we didn't have the numbers, and secondly, it's very expensive. So when we saw the temple in New Zealand, we used to think, how can the church build something like that? Because we, as a young man, I used to think that all temples have the same size. Well, while I was a stake president here back from 83 onward, I took over as a stake president and became the chairman of all the stake presidents committee for the dedication of the first temple in 1983. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable that the church would build a smaller version of the temple, and then it's open to us. And then right next is the Tongan temple. the real growth of the church and the gospel understandings and the principles of the gospel teaching was intensified and strengthened by the presence of the temple. We love the temple. Now we have the present temple, and we were called in as a counselor. Before that, the preparation for the temple was a huge undertaking when it was required for the celebrations on Saturday night, and then the temple would be dedicated on Sunday, on the 3rd of September, 2005. But in that celebration, cultural celebrations, it would be good if we would have as many as 5,000 or 6,000 young people of Samoa. Now, we were calling to various committees as chairmen of the various committees. We were calling to a meeting and presided upon by Elder Dallenbach and Elder Ho Ching, who was the area authority. And we were assigned leadership in committees. I was called in as the chairman of the committee for recommends. Anyone that will attend to sessions comes under my jurisdiction or my responsibility. Wherever they come from all over the world. The parties from New Zealand, Australia, the parties from the United States and anywhere else, and even within here. My wife, Sister Merita Fitisemanu, was asked to be the chairman of the celebration. Now, usually the priest would take care of that. We both look at each other because we're both in the main committee, and that's a huge undertaking, especially when they kept repeating 5,000 to 6,000. We've never had anything with performing 5,000 to 6,000 performers. Never. Samoans has never seen that. So we came home and pondered over that. And always remember the teachings that the Lord would not give you anything that's beyond your ability to handle it. So we faced that assignment. Now, at that time, when we went back to the next meeting, I was then asked again to be chairman of another committee, and that was security for the prophet and his counselor, for all the general authorities, for all activities of the celebrations of wherever they're learning things. And because we're going to use the satellite in all state conferences, we make sure that it's secured. Nothing is going to. And they already had a superintendent of police who was a member as a chairman. But I was shocked that at that time I was asked that would be my second committee. I remember asking President Dallenbach, everybody has one committee. You think I have time to do both? He says, well, it's really not my worry right now, it's yours. That's his personality. He's really a funny guy. But you can't say no to him. He's got So as it worked out perfect. Because now Sister Fitisemanu has to travel to various states to organize these parties, to teach them the dances, to teach them the organization for this night. And so we started traveling. And then I realized why they asked me for security. Because security have to travel with wherever they are. And while she's doing that, I'm meeting with the stake president and the high councils, interviewing them and also recruiting their support, and put in a plan of security for each stake center, so when the day of dedication comes, they know how to handle it themselves. So it worked out perfect. And plus, she has to have security, and I volunteered to be her security, her driver. And so for months, and months and months of traveling, hopping on a plane, go to American Samoa and come back. At first, the local leaders were adamant about not participating. Some of them said that they would rather work out their own because they can't come. It's too far. But we kept on trying, we kept on trying. Sometimes we needed help with somebody, and we would, President Dallenbach would ask, if you need my help, let me know. And of course, then he would help us. He would always help us as he talks to meet with the stake presidents and ask them to support. Well, at the night of the performance, they came through. They came from all over Samoa, and it's in record. It's in now. There were movies taken of that same night, and the people of the country that were there saw what they have never seen before in Samoa. The biggest crowd. And then in terms of the performance, the very first time they have ever seen Samoa perform with over 5,000 performers. So you know the Siva Sa Sa. First time that dance was performed by over 5,000 people, one time. The whole park was filled. Interestingly, afterwards, now in last year, we got the South Pacific Games. They were looking for something majestic and something that would shock the Pacific. But then the committee realized they saw that in the celebration of the temple. It was done, demonstrated to help them. And that's exactly how they approached the South Pacific Games. It was the best game they've ever had anywhere in the Pacific. They still talk about it. So there, the church again takes the lead. Once the members make up their mind and strengthen their faith, they can do miracles as they did that time. The temple itself is uniquely and a special tribute to the pioneers of Samoa, those who walked the mile, those who came from overseas in sacrifice, and those who walked barefooted from village to village, day in and day out, preach the gospel. Temple work has turned Samoa into daylight from the darkness we had traveled through. And so we see the hand of our Father in heaven in all what we've been doing. Sometimes we do it with doubts, and sometimes we use our own initiative in our own way. Now, that's the growth of the church in Samoa. When they held mission conferences, they always asked Brother Fitisemanu to speak. And many times when he finished, he was an electrifying speaker. He has the interest in his control of his people. And he preached the gospel without fear. Until this day, even the children of those saints are still speaking of what their parents talk about when Fitisemanu speaks. He has left a legacy and the courage to turn their back to their families, their royalties, their titles, to whatever it is that's important to them. Most of them now is secondary only to the kingdom of God. We're grateful for his dedication because he gave strength to a lot of those people who were suppressed and had no status in our society. But they became kings and queens in the work of the Lord. Thank you for this opportunity. I hope I have contributed something to help future generations know what it is. Dedication to the Lord, first and foremost, and the doors will open wherever you are and whatever you're doing. That's my testimony of the gospel. I love my Father, God, his Son, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost. I love it with every fiber of my bone. That first vision a young man saw, I believe it. I believe in the Book of Mormon to be the Word of God. I love it. I love it so much, I guess my mother knew I love it while I was in her womb, that when I was born, she named me Alema. She told me later, that's my gift for you, son. She learned to memorize the Book of Mormon. You ask a question, she'll tell you. What verse? That's the Father who translated the Pearl of Great Price and brought knowledge of the Pearl of Great Price and also the translations of the Book of Mormon and all the church pamphlets, all the church books that were sent to Samoa at that time. He translated them all and shone the light of the gospel throughout our members of the church. He didn't go out walking proselyting, but he proselyted through his work. Thank you again.